who opposes gender identity politics in your country? Is it feminist groups, parents groups, detransitioners, right-wing groups, the religious groups, or no one? Or let's hear who's opposing it, if anyone.
In our country, it's only religion groups that are opposing it, but since it's not a big issue, like in a public sphere or in a political sphere, so it's hard to do it. It's hard to organize against it because nobody is actually debating it in the public or political level. But of course, I oppose the gender identity myself, and unfortunately other radical feminists from Lithuania or Lithuanians, they are living abroad, most of them, so it's really hard to organize within ourselves. And I usually get the support from random women who are not identifying themselves as a radical feminists, but they have common sense and they understand that this is a ridiculous idea and we should have a debate about it. So there is no such an organization within the feminists which is opposing this, but there is plenty queer feminists who are in organizations already, and they're anytime they get a chance, they just go and put the trans agenda in the front of the page, and you know, like they will slip it in and say, oh yeah, and the trans rights also are important.
The Lesbian Action Center in Berlin, that is a clear opponent of gender identity politics, as previously mentioned already. The German Constitution grants equal rights to the sexes. So far, so good. It requires the state to enforce equal rights and to abolish existing disadvantages for women. German tax law, therefore, has to be interpreted in light of this fundamental right. Different modes of membership are therefore compatible with the Constitution. Since lesbian women have to be promoted in order to compensate for discrimination and disadvantages, it is no unequal treatment or discrimination to exclude men from regular membership and instead grant them sponsoring membership if so desired. Importance of boundaries has been accepted by the tax authorities. Let's Reloaded is granting access to most of its events exclusively to biological women. Trans women have been trying, however, several times to get access to such events, but they have been successfully rejected. So as you see, it is possible, but difficult.
In Angola, the only group that it's opposed to transgenderism and all the things that are part of LGBT, unfortunately, is the religion. In Angola, it's well known, like they put in the mind of the people that only women and men exist, and the man needs to behave like a man and the woman like a woman. So their basic is the religion that actually they put the people in the box and say to them, God create women and men, and everything different from that, it's a sin or it's against our culture. Family, I think I could say families also, because it's something about the culture in Angola. We have a view of men and a woman as creations of God, and they need to follow a certain pattern to be accepted by the society.
Nobody really opposes gender ideology as a separate issue. The reality is that most people I've spoken to confuse gender ideology and LGBT rights that are linked to sexual orientation, and that of course can create a huge threat against the rights of lesbians, gays and bisexuals in my country, while the LGBT movement remains as one in Greece. Concerning the groups who condemn gender ideology, those are mainly conservative ultra-right-wing parties. Certain examples are the governing center-right party in Greece, Nea Demokratia, nationalist parties, and surprisingly enough, the Greek Communist Party that uses Marxist arguments against gender ideology, saying that such demands can disorientate the labor movement from its fundamental goals. But in the end of the day, the Communist Party in Greece is also against feminism, so that doesn't count that much. At the same time, the Greek Orthodox Church is another conservative group that strongly condemns the LGBT movement and the recent law on gender ideology. In fact, I would say that the Greek Orthodox Church is probably the biggest enemy of gender ideology in Greece right now. Unfortunately, there are no feminist groups or leftist groups that openly oppose gender ideology, and that is due to lack of information of what is actually happening in countries that have adopted similar laws. There is only one feminist group that also happens to be an NGO composed by older feminists who openly condemn sex work, and one of their representatives whom I've talked to was against the trans agenda. The good news now is that two weeks ago, I found out that there is a gender critical Facebook page with over 1,000 followers under the name Heretic Feminism, Heretikos Feminismos. And that page openly condemns gender ideology and explains why we need radical feminism more than ever and what are the results of trans ideology abroad. It should not surprise you that there aren't more gender critical groups here in Greece, since the majority of feminist groups, LGBT groups, NGOs, and human rights organizations adopt the gender ideology. Those groups are very well organized and have populated social media, especially Facebook, that is mostly used from younger generations here in Greece, to cancel any other opinion that poses questions against gender. On top of that, the legislation concerning trans people is fairly new, and people do not know what the new law includes, neither what is the experience of detransitioners. You realize that all this ignorance sets a very cloudy framework for people who want to set more questions about this movement.
But there isn't actually any group or organization opposed to gender identity ideology because, as I said, I think gender ideology is actually very much still kind of hidden from the public in Japan. So the bureaucrats and academics are kind of working, and I know this sounds a bit stupid, but they are changing the registrations, but ordinary Japanese people just don't know it, and precisely because Japanese people still don't quite understand the difference between sex and gender because of our history. People just assume that it's just all a matter of a change in words, but in actual fact, a lot like the UK and the US, a lot of things are going on. So only kind of so this whole opposition is actually grassroots, and people who are on Twitter who actually came across this issue started to realize that something really terrible is going on. So many Japanese women on Twitter, they don't even identify themselves as feminists, or even they probably don't even know anything about feminism probably, but they just happen to learn this whole situation and started to get concerned and started to raise voices